a physical copy of it anymore. I read this book mainly because of Bailey. She wanted me to read it, and I remember she bought me my original copy I had of it. Also, I'm tapping on this tin book, so The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. Basically, it's just about this teenage boy, and in high school he creates a extracurricular club, and it is doing like pallbearing, and he meets a girl, and she joins his club, and she's kind of like interesting to him, and he can never really figure her out. And long story short, I just ended up not really liking this book because it had a lot of like build up, kind of, and you expected this big thing to happen. At least I did. I also wasn't that interested in the main character, like, at all, to be honest. And I don't know, it honestly, in this book, I don't have a unpopular opinion. This book is not super loved on Goodreads anyways. So yeah, it was kind of a struggle to get through this book, but I ended up rating this book 2 stars, and I just didn't love it. I'm sorry, Bailey. She was very disappointed that I didn't like this book, but okay, so for my number 5 worst book, I really didn't put a lot of the like really bad books I read on this list because they were mostly Kindle Unlimited, just like fantasy romance, so there's no point because it's just, you know, you get what you get when you read those, and I just most of the time don't end up liking them as much. The first one is honestly, I was really excited for this. It's So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. I ended up just giving it a 3. Honestly, I would probably say it's more like a 2.5. I wanted to love this book. I've read 2 other Rachel Harrison books and gave them 4 stars each. It was The Return and then Such Sharp Teeth. I actually would say I would give that a 4.5. I listened to both the audiobooks and I recommend them, but So Thirsty was just, it's a vampire story, which I love vampire stories, and I wanted to like this so much, and everything about it, I was like, I hate this. Like, it was just a really simple, like, story of 2 friends going away on a birthday trip and going to this cabin and finding like this group of vampires that they hang out with, and then, you know, it elevates, and it was just not interesting to me, and I wanted it to be so much more, and it was just, like I said, boring to me, so I kind of hate that. But number 4 on my list is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Basically, this group of middle-aged women in a southern community start getting terrorized by this vampire, and they have a book club, and at these like meetings they kind of start trying to catch this vampire, and there's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of the gist of it. The main gripe I had with this book is I didn't like the time jumps. It kind of took me out of
wanted this to be something so fun and just so, like, I wanted the romance to really pay off, and I guess she's waiting either for the next one or maybe even the next one. I think there's gonna be a fourth one, but right now it's up in the air if I'll read the third one. A lot of people hate the first one, so
Going off of Bailey's last one, I literally DNF'd Assistant to the Villain, and I tried to read it this year, I believe. But anyway, my number 2 worst book that I read this year is Lakewood by Megan Giddings, and I went into this very hopeful because it had been described as like a Black Mirror-esque book. I was actually really excited for what this book had to say, like the commentary of this book and just like everything about it. I was very interested in and intrigued, but honestly it just fell flat. It has like a 3.4 on Goodreads, and I ended up giving it a 2-star review. I did read this in February, and it's kind of hard to remember exactly why I didn't love it, but the main reason was just the ending, and the like reveal of the story was not enough for me personally, so would not recommend, honestly.
okay, so my number 2 least favorite book is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Honestly, this book I was really excited about. I think the cover is beautiful. I didn't know a lot going into this, besides it was a like camp kind of mystery, lit fic almost, of a girl going missing and it having a lot of like family drama. I probably will end up reading the author's book that came before this one because I own it and I'm also interested in it. If I like it, I don't know, maybe. I hope I will. I don't know, I just felt like it was very long. It's a very long book, but I find that recently, within the last like maybe 4 years, 3 years, a lot of the mystery thrillers I read just don't do it for me. They're very like, okay, like everybody's like, oh my god, love this, and I just don't think that's like a genre for me anymore, really. But like I said, I was really intrigued by this book, so
Okay, we have reached my least favorite book I read of 2024, and that is Reckless by Lauren Roberts. So this is in the Powerless trilogy, and this is the second installment. I was insanely excited for this release. I even went and bought the Barnes & Noble edition of this book, which was not cheap in terms of books because it was a hardback and it was like the exclusive edition and everything. And let's just say one of my biggest regrets was buying and reading this book this year. Saying this book was a disappointment is like an understatement. I loved the first one, Powerless, in this series, but this book, it felt so rushed. And I did actually make, in my ASMR vlog I did at the end of the summer this year, I did a little mini book wrap up, and I talked about this book. So if you want to see like the full like kind of rant I did about this book, it's in that video. I thought it was rushed. I thought what she did with the characters was just like not good. There's so many things. I probably will not read the third one, to be honest.
this is a cutie little calico critter that Brooke gave me for Christmas in a mystery bag, and I absolutely love it. This is the one I wanted. So my most disappointing read, honestly, all these are about the same to me, but this one I was just looking forward to so much. It's Wild Love by Elsie Silver, the first book in the Rose Hill trilogy, I believe, or maybe it'll be 4, I'm not really sure. As you can see, best friend. So there's like a lot of tropes in this that I was like, oh, I'm gonna love this book. And I really didn't. I can't explain it. It was just not what I wanted. I didn't feel like a connection between the two main characters. We'll try to read the second and the third one, but they're not really on my like want to read immediately list.
Okay, so now we're moving on to our favorite books that we read this year. Yay! We get to be more positive, and I'm excited to go through our list because I read some really good books this year, and I think Bailey would agree. She also read a lot of good books, so let's go ahead and get into it. But first, we're gonna light this little candle.
This candle is from Al Great from like I believe like 2018 or 2019. I've only lit it like maybe 3 times. I've never lit this candle. I'm just kidding.
Try to light it. There we go. Careful, can you hear it? Not really. Barely. I thought we were keeping it lit, but okay. My 5th favorite book I read this year is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and I absolutely fell in love with her writing this year. I read this entire trilogy, and this was definitely my favorite, and this is the most recent one. I remember I was like racing to finish this by the end of the summer because I wanted like the summer vibes, and this book just had, like I said, it has amazing writing. I loved the whole plot about how both of the main characters, the whole thing is they feel like they're cursed, and what that means in this book is that every person they get out of a relationship with immediately goes on to find like their forever partner. The whole like setup is very interesting, and I rated this 5 stars. I very highly recommend this book if you're into romance like at all. And I don't know, I just really love this book, and it has a blurb by Emily Henry on the front, and I would compare her writing to Emily Henry for sure.
Okay, so for my top 5 books of the year, they're kind of in order, not really. The first and second book, my number 1 and number 2 could honestly be interchangeable, but my number 5 book is A Funny Story by Emily Henry. This book is about Daphne and Miles, and at the beginning of the story, I believe they're both engaged to different people, or at least Daphne's engaged to someone else. Daphne's partner and Miles's partner are in love with each other, and so they leave both of them to be together, and Daphne doesn't really have anywhere to go, so I believe she goes to drop off her ex-fiance's stuff at Miles's house, and she's just talking to him about how she doesn't really have anywhere to go, and he's like, I have an extra bedroom open now. So they move in together, and obviously their romance like stems from that, and I just fell in love with these characters, and I thought the story was so fun and so heartbreaking at times, and honestly I love anything Emily Henry writes, but this one was really special. Well, I never read Happy Place last year by Emily Henry. I really need to get to that, but this one was amazing.
Number 4 on my list was not surprising to me at all. I knew I was probably going to rate this book high because the other books I've read from this author have been amazing. And I'm talking about Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. Obviously, I've read Gone Girl and watched the movie, and I've also read the other short story that she's released. Basically, I loved this book, and I loved how the plot unraveled. I loved how this took place in a small town. As someone who grew up in a small town, I could definitely see something like this happening. Like, it was very believable to me. The main character is one of those unlikable, but you almost feel sorry for her and in turn like her. It's not ranked higher than Gone Girl, but this is definitely a very solid thriller mystery book. Okay, so for my number 4, this is not it, but this is in the series. So this is Legendborn by Tracy Dion. The first book in, I believe, the Legendborn cycle is the trilogy or series name. I'm not sure which one it is going to be. But this is all about Bree, and I believe she's 16 at the start of this, and she gets accepted into this school. This is a King Arthur, like Arthurian legend kind of retelling, and so obviously you can tell she has like powers and stuff. I gave this first one 4 stars, but my actual number 4 is the second book in the series. This is Blood Marked. I just love this. I don't really want to talk about what this one's about because I feel like it goes into like spoiling kind of territory, but these books are so beautiful. Like the writing, the actual stories, the characters. This character right here, character development is amazing with him, and I love Bree so much. I don't know, all I can say is I can't wait for March for the 3rd one to come out. I'm so excited. You need to read this series if you like fantasy, because it's amazing. It is YA, I believe, but it's so good. I know some people kind of have like issues with like young adult and, you know, being too kiddie, but really these books don't read like that. The next book is one of the few nonfiction books I read this year. I do enjoy a good nonfiction. I just didn't tend to pick this one up as much, but I really wanted to read this book this year because it just felt very important, and I had seen a lot of videos praising this author's writing and just her works in general, so I definitely really wanted to read this book. Number 3 on my list is Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. This book just dives into everything in the manosphere, which is a term you learn about in this book. This is definitely not an easy read. I definitely had to put this book down for a little bit and span it out over the course of like a month or 2. That's how long it took me to read this. I also annotated this book and have a lot of tabs in here of important stuff that I wanted to remember, or just in case I have a friend or someone who wants to read this, they could read like this version if they wanted. Basically, this book just covers like misogyny and sexism in our world, mainly in the US and the UK, but obviously I know that misogyny and sexism are very rampant in today's society, and I understood that, but this book just goes so much deeper. What the author did is she spent a whole year kind of going undercover on these subreddits and these online discussion boards, and she immersed herself in this to see what was actually going on kind of behind the scenes. And the whole like overarching point of this book is that not enough is being done about the very real and violent things that happen every day in our society, especially about people who are misogynistic and sexist. So I don't know, this book just, it really hit me very hard. I really recommend this if you're interested even slightly. You should read this. Okay, for my 3rd favorite book, honestly, I might even say my top 3 are all tied, because this book had me in like a chokehold, and that is Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. This is a Greek mythology book, like kind of, you know, obviously about Kaikeyi, and all about like her. Basically, you start with her when she's probably, I feel like 5 or 6 maybe, and you learn all about like big thing that happened in her childhood, which was her mom being exiled, and you learn obviously through time what actually happened, and so you get to kind of grow up with her, and you get to see her react
grows into being this leader. I'll read you this quote. I was born on the full moon under an auspicious constellation, the holiest of positions. Much good it did me. I don't know. I fell absolutely in love with this. The writing. Kaikehi as a character. You get to meet her sons. This book made me so emotional, and this is also kind of a chunkier book, and it's so worth reading. I'm not one to love Greek mythology books. Like, I read Song of Achilles and really liked it. And, you know, that's a very popular one, but this one I just feel like deserves a lot more hype. It's so good.
My number 2 book I read towards the end of this year. I actually just recently finished this, and it was kind of on my radar, but not really. I've been seeing this book all over Goodreads, and I knew I really wanted to read it, so I put a hold on Libby, and after months of waiting, I finally got it and was able to read it on my Kindle. My number 2 is The Wedding People by Alison Espach, and this book just completely blew me away. I went in expecting one thing, and it honestly wasn't what I was expecting at all, and I'm kind of glad I went into it that way. But this book just says so much about the human experience and what life is. I feel like if you read the synopsis of this, you won't expect it to really hit that deep, but it honestly does. And the main character, in my opinion, was very relatable in the ways that she thought, and not like the main way you would think if you read this book. She's just one of those unlikable characters who is so real, and honestly that's why I liked her so much. And the plot of this is just something I've never heard before, and it was just very unique, and you really do just get caught up in these characters' lives, and you feel like you're experiencing what they are. I really went through this very quickly, and I rated this 5 stars. It was just so impactful, and honestly, I'm very glad I read this year.
My number 2 book is Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin, and I think this cover is beautiful. It's a beautiful cover. It's probably my favorite cover of the year. Look how pretty. I love it. I read this book at the beginning of the year, and it's still one of my favorites. I look back on it very fondly. I won't get into too much about what this is about, because I feel like this is one of those books where you can really go into it blind and enjoy it the same as it maybe you knew a little bit about it. This is just all about our main character Enid, and she has like some interesting quirks about her, and this book made me cry multiple times. This was my first ever book from this author. Since then I've read her other one, Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, but 5 stars will be, it's one of my favorites of all time. It's moved into like that list, so I didn't expect to love this at all. I was just like, I'm gonna read it. I got it as book of the month like a month early, and yeah, it's definitely one of my top books ever.
Okay, the funniest part of this entire video, in my opinion, is that my least favorite book this year happens to be in the same series as my most favorite book I read this year. My favorite book I read this year is, in fact, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. So I read this in January of this year, so it is once again in that wrap-up video I did. This book absolutely checked every single box for me. I loved the fantasy, I loved the romance, the banter, the is entertaining. That's what I'll say.
So for my number one book, this is kind of a wild card book. Honestly, I read it on a whim. I was just like, it's short, it's a beachy kind of summer read. I'll just read it, it won't really matter. And I don't know what happened. It completely captured me, like my heart, my soul. It made me cry. This book made me cry multiple times. So I want to add that a lot of people do not like this book. It has a lot of low ratings on Goodreads, like a lot, like a ton. And it's basically people saying how boring it is, and I guess you could look at it as being boring, but there's just something about it I can't explain, and that is Sandwich by Catherine Newman. This book is just all about a family who goes to Cape Cod for like a week in the summer every year since, I want to say, I think it's from the perspective of the mother, who's like in her 50s. They've been going to the same little beach house since her kids were very young, and our kids are now in their like 20s. I have a lot of marks, which I don't have them like on this, but I marked inside of it, and I was gonna read a quote that really like gets me, that I love so much. Life is a seesaw, and I am standing dead center, still imbalanced. Living kids on one side, living parents on the other. Nikki here with me at the fulcrum. Don't move a muscle, I think, but I will. Of course, you have to. This is kind of like the perfect book to me. It was so sentimental, and it was so uplifting, but also heartbreaking at times. And like I said, it is a very short book, like very short. But I don't know, that was my wild card of the year, and it somehow became my number one. So
Thank you guys so much for watching. Those are our top 5 best and worst books we read this year. We really quickly wanted to just show 3 books each that we are excited to read in the new year. This is also a little mini Christmas book haul. So this is on my list. Bailey did give me this book, so. I'm so excited to read this.
The Will of the Many by James Islington. The second one is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Long. It has beautiful sprayed edges. I like sticky sound. My last one is a book Brooke gave me for Christmas, and I'm so excited to read this. It's Martyr by Kava Akbar.
Okay, so once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. We really wanted to make this since I'm here for Christmas right now, and we wanted to film a video together, and we both love ASMR, so thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments what your best and worst book you read this year was, or one you're looking forward to reading next year. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. And if you've never seen my face before, subscribe down below to see when I make a new video. I hope you all are having an amazing day. And I'll see you guys in my next video.
Peace.
And I was really excited. Love when my throat makes like a frog noise.
ASMR on the frog.